The mountains kept their secrets close. Pines rustled in the wind like whispers behind closed doors, and shadows stretched long even at midday. In a crooked stretch of the Sierra foothills, where the rocks were jagged and the paths ran like veins between the trees, a shepherd watched his flock, with a shotgun across his knees and judgment in his eyes. Jonas Blake was a man carved from hard years. He spoke little, prayed often, and believed the world had gone to hell the moment his wife died, coughing blood into a handkerchief. Left with a daughter and too much silence, he raised her like another lamb to guard. Firm hand, closed gates. But Lena Blake was no lamb. She'd grown like wild ivy, climbing over the fences her father built. Hair dark as wet bark, eyes pale and watchful like a hawk's. She spent her days roaming the high meadows with a canvas bag of tools, shears, thread, a water skin, and a leather-bound journal full of wildflowers she sketched by memory. There was more tenderness in her drawings than Jonas had shown her in years. He didn't like the way she wandered so far, didn't trust the woods beyond the ridge. Too many things in this world hid behind a smile. He'd seen that in men and beasts alike. But Lena found peace in those hidden places. That's where she first saw him. It was a coppery dusk, the kind that stretched everything thin and long. Lena had followed the bleating of a wayward lamb down to the creek, and found more than she bargained for. A man lay half in the water, shirt torn and slick with blood. His hand gripped a revolver, but his eyes, startled and stormy, locked onto hers like he'd been waiting all his life to see them. "Don't scream," he rasped. She didn't. He said his name was Silas, claimed he'd been shot by a land baron's men for refusing to work without pay. It sounded half lie, but there was something in his voice, a jagged softness, like someone still bleeding from things you couldn't see. Lena helped him to a thicket not far from the water, wrapped his wound, brought food in secret. He asked nothing from her, yet she returned each morning. Days passed. Trust built slowly, like frost on a window. She learned he'd ridden from Nevada, that he could read Latin, and that he hated horses. She told him about her mother's lullabies, about the dream she once had of becoming a schoolteacher. He laughed quietly at that. "You'd scare the hell out of little boys," he said, and she smiled longer than she should have. But secrets in the mountains are like sap in the bark. They eventually seep through. Jonas found the blood-stained cloths beneath Lena's cot. He followed her the next morning, slow and silent, until he saw her kneeling beside Silas near the ravine, hand on his chest, lips brushing his temple. It was not the touch of mercy, it was love. When she returned that night, Jonas was waiting on the porch, shotgun across his lap. "You think I wouldn't notice?" he said, voice low and steady. "You've brought a snake into this house." "He's no snake," she replied, standing tall despite the tremble in her gut. "He was wounded, left for dead. He's one of them, a hollow spur man. There's a bounty on his head and blood on his hands. The Lord didn't send him to you. He sent you to destroy him." Lena took a step forward. "You don't know him." Jonas stood. "I know what men are. I was one once." His eyes burned, not with hatred, but with something colder, conviction. "I raised you to be pure, not to lay with outlaws in the dirt like some saloon harlot." Lena's breath caught, but she didn't look away. "Mama wouldn't have wanted this." "Mama's dead," he spat, "and I'll be damned before I let the devil take my daughter too." He lifted the gun, not in threat, but in finality. "You end it, tonight, or I will." The moon rose pale and speechless as Lena packed her things. She left the gate open behind her, her boots soundless on the dry path. In her bag were food, bandages, and her mother's wedding ring, worn on a cord around her neck. She found Silas beneath the stars, awake and tense. He'd seen the look in her eyes before. "Your father knows." She nodded. He sat up slowly, jaw clenched. "You should leave me behind. He won't stop." But Lena knelt beside him, fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "Then we won't stop either." Somewhere, an owl called through the trees. Down in the canyon, the sheep stirred restlessly under the shepherd's gaze, but he did not sleep that night. He sat by the fire with scripture in one hand and the shotgun in the other, whispering prayers for salvation and sharpening the blade of his rage. The mountains, ever silent, made no promises. They only watched. They climbed higher into the timberline, where the air thinned and the trees grew close like conspirators. Silas leaned against Lena in the saddle, his wound weeping through the bandage, but he made no sound. Every groan felt like a trail marker for the devil behind them. They reached the old hunter's shack by dawn, a crooked skeleton of pine and rusted nails clinging to the slope above Cold Hollow. Lena propped Silas against the doorframe and kicked it open. Dust poured out like breath from a dead man's chest. It wasn't much. A stove that didn't draw, a cot stuffed with moldy wool, a single shutter hanging loose. But it stood between them and the night, and that was enough. Silas dropped onto the cot. Lena wiped the sweat from his brow and started a fire, boiling water with wild sage and crushed pine tips. He watched her through half-lidded eyes. "You could have run," he muttered. She didn't answer at first. The fire crackled in the silence between them. "I didn't want to," she finally said. "Not from you." By the third day, Silas could sit upright. He told her everything then, not just the parts he thought would make her stay. He had ridden with the Hollow Spur gang, not by choice at first. He'd been hired to guide them through the dry valleys east of Carson. Said they were moving cattle. By the time he realized it was stolen payroll, blood had already been spilled. He didn't shoot, but he didn't stop them either. One marshal died in the crossfire. That guilt rode closer than any posse ever could. "I walked away before sundown," Silas said, voice tight. "I thought that was enough." Lena held her breath, listening not just to the words, but the weight behind them. "You could have told me sooner. I didn't want to see you look at me like this." She turned to the window, watching the trees. "We can't stay here." "I know." But down in the lowlands, her father's storm had already begun. Jonas Blake rode into town with a shotgun strapped across his saddle and vengeance riding pillion. At the saloon, he stood before the card table like a prophet before sinners and declared his daughter taken by a bandit. Not seduced, corrupted. He spoke of fire and sin, of devils in plain clothes and redemption through gunpowder. Some laughed. Most didn't. The name Hollow Spur still turned stomachs. By nightfall, Jonas had 6 men riding with him. 2 were bounty hunters, mean-eyed and drunk on reward posters. 1 was an ex-Confederate with a gold tooth and a scar that ran down to his collarbone. The rest were ranch hands, sick of taxes and thirsty for blood that wouldn't cost them jail time. They called themselves a posse, but there was no badge among them, just a trail of smoke and righteousness. Back in the hills, Lena woke to the sound of hooves echoing through the canyon. They were still distant, but not for long. She packed quickly. Silas staggered to his feet, pale and panting. He strapped on the revolver Lena had taken from Jonas's closet before fleeing, checking the cylinder with trembling fingers. "We run west," she said, pointing to a ridge she knew from childhood. "There's a split in the rocks, Rattler's Gate. They won't know it." He nodded, but his steps were heavy. Each movement was a struggle, a reminder that he wasn't built for fleeing anymore. They didn't make it. The posse came upon them in a clearing just shy of the ridge. The horses came hard and loud, snarling through the trees like beasts from hell. Jonas rode at the head, eyes black with purpose. "Drop the gun, boy," he called, "or I'll drop you." Silas raised the revolver. Lena stepped in front of him. "He's done nothing to you," she shouted. "He's done plenty to the Lord," Jonas replied. "And you." Silas tried to push her aside. "Don't." A shot cracked the air. Lena flinched, expecting pain. But it was Silas who stumbled. His leg folded beneath him like a broken plank. The gang fanned out. Jonas dismounted, stalking forward like a preacher on Judgment Day. He grabbed Lena by the arm and yanked her close. "You were my daughter," he hissed. "I gave you everything." "You gave me a cage," she spat. His grip tightened. "You'll thank me in heaven." She fought him, clawed at his coat, but he dragged her back through the trees, toward his tethered horse. Behind them, Silas bled into the dirt, the revolver just out of reach. By dusk, the party made camp under a low canopy of black pines. Silas was gone. They'd left him to the wolves. Lena sat bound by the wrists, her back against a rock, watching the fire flicker against her father's face. He was whispering to himself, scripture pouring from his lips like water from a cracked bucket. At midnight he rose, walked toward her with the shotgun cradled like a cradle song. "I asked the Lord for a sign," he said, voice low. "He told me sacrifice cleanses." She met his eyes. "If you think this is God's will, you've never known him." Jonas raised the gun. A branch cracked. Jonas spun. From the trees came a voice, sharp and sure. "That's far enough, preacher." A woman stepped into the firelight. Her coat was heavy wool, her boots mud-stained. Silver-gray hair was pulled tight beneath a wide-brimmed hat. She carried a long rifle, and she held it like she knew what each bullet meant. Jonas frowned. "Martha Griggs. I buried a husband and 2 sons," she said. "Don't think I won't put one more in the ground if you keep walking." He hesitated. The rifle didn't. A shot rang out. Jonas dropped to his knees, clutching his shoulder. The shotgun fell. Lena stared, stunned. Martha lowered the rifle. "Come on, girl," she said. "Let's get you out of the fire before it spreads." Behind them, the trees stood still, watching, waiting. The mountain had chosen sides. They climbed beneath the moon, wind snapping at their coats as the firelight shrank behind them. Martha led with the calm of someone who'd seen too much to fear anything that walked on 2 legs. Her rifle rested across her shoulders, but her eyes never stopped moving. Lena stumbled more than once, half from exhaustion, half from the sudden unraveling of everything she'd known. Her wrist stung from the ropes, her heart from the echo of gunfire. She kept seeing Silas on the ground, blood darkening the earth, his hand twitching toward the revolver that never came. "You were watching," Lena said finally, her voice hoarse. "I was," Martha replied, not breaking stride. "You don't live up here without watching. Folks think the mountains are quiet. They're wrong. The pines gossip more than saloon girls." They crested a ridge as the first threads of dawn bled into the sky. Below them lay a narrow valley, tucked between granite walls and shrouded in low mist. Martha's cabin stood at its center, stone chimney smoking, goats penned beside the stream, shutters closed like tired eyelids. Inside, warmth wrapped around Lena like a quilt. Martha stoked the fire with practiced hands, laid out bread, dried meat, and boiled chicory in a tin pot. She moved with quiet efficiency, as if distraction was the only thing that kept grief from cracking through. "You knew my father," Lena said, studying her. Martha nodded slowly, back before he forgot what love looked like. She poured 2 mugs and sat opposite Lena, the rifle leaning against her chair like an old friend. "He wasn't always like this," Lena murmured, as if confessing to someone who could forgive her memories. "He used to sing. Only to her, my mother. And when she passed, he stopped." Martha's eyes softened. "Grief does strange things. Some folks drink it away. Others bleed it into others. Your pa, he carved it into stone and built his soul around it. And now he wants to bury me beside it." Martha didn't flinch. "He won't get the chance." Lena looked up. "Why help me? You could have let him finish what he started." The widow stared into her cup a long while. "My youngest boy," she said quietly, "was caught up in a raid near Dry Bone Pass. Thought he was fighting for justice. Turned out, he was following a badge that meant nothing. He got gunned down by men who smiled while they did it." She looked up, voice steady. "Justice doesn't wear uniforms, and it sure don't live in the barrel of a righteous man's gun." Lena sat back, the weight of it settling into her bones. She understood then. This woman hadn't just saved her life. She'd seen in Lena the ghost of something lost, and chosen not to lose it again. That night, while Martha slept in the rocker with her rifle within reach, Lena stepped out into the cold. The moon sat low, glowing like a wounded eye above the peaks. She followed the stream down to the bend where the water whispered over stones. There, beneath a clutch of elder pines, she found a trail, scattered prints, hoof marks, faint blood smears. She moved fast, heart pounding, and then she saw him. Silas lay slumped against a fallen tree, half frozen, his lips cracked, skin waxen, but his chest still rose. "Silas," she gasped, falling to her knees. His eyes fluttered. "Thought I dreamed you." "You nearly did." She half dragged, half lifted him back to the cabin. Martha opened the door without a word, already laying out blankets, heating broth. The night passed in quiet urgency, bandages, steam, whispered prayers. By morning, Silas could speak without coughing blood. "I don't reckon I'll ever outrun it," he said, staring at the ceiling. "The things I done, the people I rode with." "You left them," Lena replied. "That counts for something." He shook his head. "Not in their eyes. Not in mine." Martha entered then, carrying a saddlebag. She tossed it beside the bed. "There's a railroad crew camped 3 ridges east. They'll leave by week's end. I know a man there. Owes me more than one favor. You two ride fast. You can be on a train to Utah before anyone smells the smoke." Silas looked to Lena. "We can't keep running." "No," she agreed. "But we can start walking somewhere worth going." Martha stood at the door, her silhouette carved in gold by the morning light. "I'll hold your father off," she said. "Long enough." "You don't have to," Lena whispered. "I do," Martha replied. "Because if no one stands up to men like him, there'll be no one left to carry the stories of those who tried." She paused, glancing over her shoulder. "Next full moon, plant something. Doesn't matter what. Just let the earth know you still believe in growing." And then she was gone. The widow on the ridge, the woman who'd made peace with her pain not by burying it, but by shielding others from its reach. She never asked for gratitude, only that her name last longer than her sorrow. As Lena and Silas prepared the horses that night, they both knew they would never return to that cabin, but they would carry it with them, in memory, in silence, in the roots of whatever they chose to grow next. Behind them, the pine stood tall and still, waiting, watching, remembering. They rode at first light, the frost still clinging to the grass, shadows long across the valley floor. Lena kept close to Silas, who sat hunched in the saddle, jaw clenched against pain. Every hoofbeat was a memory trying to catch them. They didn't speak much. Words seemed too fragile for the weight they carried. The trail east bent along high ridges and through narrow switchbacks, until the land dropped into a yawning stretch of canyon. It was called Gutter's Hollow, a scar in the earth where outlaws had once dumped their dead in gold dust, had flowed like water in whispered tales. Few crossed it by choice, but the railroad camp lay just beyond, so they pressed on. At midday, they dismounted to lead the horses down the descent. The walls rose steep and close on either side, casting them in a copper gloom. Birds didn't sing here. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Halfway down the gorge, the air changed, a silence that felt arranged. Then came the voice. "Did you think the mountains would keep you, daughter?" Lena turned, her breath catching. Jonas Blake stood atop the trail behind them, his coat torn, eyes burning with something that had gone past fury and into something quieter, like cold fire. He was alone, or seemed it, but she knew better. From the rocks came 3 others, the bounty man with the scar, the gold-toothed Confederate, and a third she didn't know. Young Twitchy, carrying a long-barreled rifle like it was heavier than he was. Silas stepped in front of Lena, swaying. He raised his pistol, hand trembling. Jonas laughed once, bitter. "You can barely lift it, boy." "I only need 1 shot," Silas said. "Then make it count." The canyon walls swallowed the echo of that moment, and in it, time seemed to hold its breath. "I never meant for it to be this way," Lena said, her voice steady but raw. "You turned love into sin. You twisted my choices into shame." Jonas tilted his head, almost curious. "And what would you have me do? Smile while you rot beside a killer?" "He's not a killer." He walked away. "Can't you see that count for something?" Jonas's jaw tightened. "Not enough." Then he raised his shotgun. The canyon erupted. A single crack, sharp, distant, ripped through the air. The twitchy boy dropped first, his rifle clattering beside him. From the ridge above, smoke curled from a barrel. Another shot. The Confederate spun, a neat hole between his eyes. The bounty man ran. Martha Griggs stepped from the rim, her rifle steady, face carved from stone. She looked like justice wrapped in wool and smoke. "For bullets left," she called. "Best start praying." Jonas turned back to Lena, desperation in his eyes now, less wrath, more ruin. "You'd let her kill me?" he asked. "No," Lena said. "I'd let you choose. Drop the gun. Walk away." Jonas hesitated. For a flicker of a moment, the old man showed through, tired, hollowed by loss. Then he raised the shotgun again. The shot never came. Silas fired first. His bullet hit the shotgun's barrel, tearing it sideways, sparking metal. Jonas staggered. Martha fired again, this time low. The old man fell to his knees, clutching his leg, groaning but alive. Silas lowered the pistol. Lena exhaled, legs buckling beneath her. Martha descended slowly, keeping her rifle on the rest of the rocks until she stood beside them. "It's over," she said. "No," Lena replied. "It's begun." They left Jonas there alive, stripped of gun and pride. Martha would send for a marshal from the railroad camp. Let the law decide what kind of man he'd be remembered as. By the time the sun set over the canyon, Lena and Silas had reached the far side. The railroad crew greeted them with suspicion, then quiet understanding once Martha handed over a letter with her seal. The foreman read it, spat, then nodded. "Train leaves in the morning," he said. They slept that night in a canvas tent, beneath stars bright enough to sear through memory. Lena lay beside Silas, listening to the world beyond the canvas. "You ever think we'll stop running?" he asked. She turned to him, brushing hair from his brow. "No," she said, "but we'll stop running from who we are." He smiled, faint and crooked. "That's something." When the train left at dawn, two figures stood side by side on the last car, one still limping, the other watching the horizon like it owed her an answer. Behind them, Martha stood on the ridge, rifle slung, coat whipping in the wind. She didn't wave, just nodded once, like a page turned in an old book. Justice hadn't come from a badge or a rope that day. It had come from a widow on a ridge, and from a girl with mountain eyes who chose love over fear and truth over blood. The land didn't forget such stories, and neither would the wind.